Hello, friends. Welcome to our podcast, Learning Matters. Today, we are here to talk about adolescent mental health and their well being. I have with me Neena David today. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Monila, and thank you to the Teacher Foundation for having me over.
Education shifted to digital platform, and an exposure to technology became just inevitable. It almost became basic in our households. The pandemic sort of created this very perfect bubble, of seclusion with technology. Like like as just one on one with your screen, and for 6 to 7 hours a day in some cases. So it can lead to numerous possibilities, and I wouldn't like to be pessimistic here, but I would like to know from you, in a more balanced sort of way, what has really happened in your observation. I mean, from what you have observed and experienced.
Yes. There are so many important points that you touched upon there, Manila, and I'm hoping that I can address all of them in how I'm seeing this. I think it's interesting that prior to the pandemic, our discussions around tech use and device usage and things, all things tech related, were polarized in the sense that parents would come into sessions and say, would define this as good and bad, right?
Yes.
And those were usually the conversations that our sessions
so
would
black
revolve
and
around.
white
Very black and white, absolutely,
Yes.
right? But with the pandemic, it shifted it completely, and like you said, it turned things right over onto its head, to the point where we're saying that screen time is now inevitable. This is here to stay. There is no denying it. We've moved from, all screen time is bad versus good, to looking at what is your child doing while they are on the screen, right? What are they using their screens for? Because the screen and access to digital tech was their connect and way to the world. And I think parents were at the beginning of the pandemic very lost in terms of trying to figure out what boundaries would usually make sense, because whatever was making sense prior to that kind of flew out of the window, because now you had a school who came in saying that we need your child to be online and plugged in, and whatever recommendation the schools gave was definitely more, like triple more than what, say, the American Academy of Pediatrics would have provided to parents, right?
Yes.
Gold standard up till then. So to find themselves quite at loss in terms of how do we begin to even put these boundaries into place? What is real? What is not? How much of screen time is bad for my child? So many of these questions were constantly, being raised. And I think parents came around to the fact after a couple of months that this was what they were going to deal with. This was stretching on. And it was something that they had to wrap their heads around, whether they were comfortable with it or not. They had to, reconcile with the usage. So I think that's one set of stakeholders there, the parents, clearly, because they've been the ones, supervising and checking. The other is how students and adolescents themselves have been using it. And I feel there have been, definitely the good stuff that came through with it, which is, connections and being able to carry on with their academic learning. The not so pleasant side of things, or rather the slightly worrisome aspects of it, have definitely been the amount of time that has been spent on this, and what that has meant in terms of actual conversations, relationships, and activities that an adolescent would have been typically required to do, right? So what I'm finding now, when kids are coming back into their school settings, is this huge disconnect with just their regular circadian rhythms. So just in terms of sleep I think is, or the sleep deprivation is almost an epidemic with this adolescent population. They have been spending unseemly hours way into early hours of the morning, on some kind of device or the other. There are messages, communication that's going back and forth. So sleep is quite worrisome in terms of the amount that the adolescent is getting as opposed to how much they actually need. What I'm also locating is the sheer sense of physical fatigue in holding a day, right? Just the sense of physical energy that I would need to sustain myself, like moving around and activity levels, is so markedly different now as compared to their pandemic times where it was just so sedentary. And despite the information that we gave out to teachers and parents about, making sure that you're moving around, do your exercises, make sure that physical movement is happening, it didn't, right? It was just very, very sedentary. So in terms of the lifestyle changes that these adolescents have had to make, I think the most profound have been in terms of their sleep, the activity levels, and their ability to attend to tasks, right? So when these kids are coming back into classrooms, a teacher is usually hard pressed to compete with the glamour of an Instagram account or an Instagram post or a page, right? So they have been so used to getting their information in bites, with visuals that are changing by the millisecond, that having to recalibrate and shift their minds to something that is slower, more rigorous, perhaps more boring in some sense, but having to recalibrate is definitely taking adolescents a lot of time. And I think that's coming directly from their usage with their devices. Yeah. I think it's been particularly hard with this group also because just in terms of where they are neurologically and at brain functional levels, the reward systems have developed earlier than their risk assessment systems, right? So if being online is providing me certain rewards like, social engagement, a sense of belonging and so on, I'm going to do that regardless of whether I have a physics test or not tomorrow, because that is far out, and that means there's a risk and consequence assessment that I've had to make. And parts of my frontal lobe have not yet developed to take into account that those things have to happen. But my accelerator is on full gear, right? So with this age group, it's been particularly more vulnerable, I would think, in terms of what that digital access has meant. They have not had the wherewithal to be able to moderate and regulate its usage in a way that maybe sensible adults perhaps would do. But I think that's where it's also hit them the most, simply because of the age at which it's hit. Yeah.
And it's a challenge even for us adults to really regulate our screen usage, and and secondly also unsupervised, because not just school is happening online, but your assignments are happening online. You're going to do a lot of research online, so you're going to be spending a lot of time really unsupervised with the internet, and which can have which can have numerous but grave possibilities for this population.
Right. The thing that maybe parents and educators need to watch out for is also with this age group, I have found that there has been increased access to inappropriate content, specifically porn. And we've seen that with grades 5 upwards. So these are, students who or children who are 10 years and above, who are accessing these websites, very inappropriate. and it's finding a way back into the ways in which they're socially connecting with one another, right? So if I have watched a video and that's become the currency sometimes with groups, so this is giving me power, like, hey, have you seen this, check this out, and I'm giving you this piece of information, right?
Yes.
So when students or children are engaging in this, it's become a little harder for them to figure out how it is that I'm relating to another person in flesh and blood, right? So if I have this person that I'm attracted to, how am I actually going up and striking a conversation that feels appropriate? And you find that students are at a loss, really, in terms of how do we go about doing these simple things, because in my mind there is another set of expectations about how some conversations should go, because of certain shows that I've been watching,
Yes.
or how somebody's body should be looking like, or
Yes.
what should be the moves that one has to make, which can be devoid of where their reality is right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm also finding that they're a bit of a loss in terms of just engaging with social rules with their peers, and it's led to some unpleasant encounters, because you do have kids who feel affronted by the fact that he or she said something that was just so inappropriate, and what were they thinking when they said that? And I'm telling kids and adults that most times we're not thinking, we're just responding from something it is that we've seen. We've not really processed it in terms of, does this actually make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that takes away so much of authenticity from real life experience.
It
right?
does.
Because you have just been on this consumption of virtual reality, or like kind of a make believe kind of a world, that it just takes away from the authenticity of real life experiences, what it is like to really see somebody in the eyes, or touch somebody, or talk within within a certain perimeter, within a certain space with somebody called real.
Right.
So,
Right.
So on that note, thank you so much, Neena, for your time, for sharing your insights from your rich experience, and it was wonderful to chat with you this morning. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Monila. That has been an engaging morning. So thank you so much for having me over. And I'm just hoping for viewers or listeners out there, that sense of continuing to engage in conversations is something that they're taking from these experiences that we've had.